Hey, we're Jaij.
I am Alex. I wasn't in the other video, but I am today, yay.
And I'm Jacob.
I'm Imogen.
And today we're looking at the timeline of the thriller genre, ranging from 1927 to 2011.
Technically 2014, but that's now.
It was actually 2011.
I know, but they're still doing thriller films in 2014.
The first person to direct a thriller film was Alfred Hitchcock in 1927. The Lodger, 1927. Director Alfred Hitchcock. Starring June, Ivor Novello and Marie Alt. A serial killer known as the Avenger is on the loose in London, murdering blonde women. A mysterious man arrives at the house of Mr. and Mrs. Bunting, looking for a room to rent. The Bunting's daughter is a blonde model and is seeing one of the detectives assigned to the case. The detective becomes jealous of the lodger and begins to suspect he may be the Avenger. One of the earliest spy films was created by Fritz Lang and was Spies in 1928. This influenced many spy films in the future, most notably James Bond. Spies, 1928, director Fritz Lang, starring Rudolph Kleinrock, Gerda Maroos and Willy Fritz. The mastermind behind an ubiquitous spy operation learns of a dangerous romance between a Russian lady in his employ and a dashing agent from the government secret service. Hitchcock then went on to make Blackmail in 1929, which was his and Britain's first sound film. Blackmail, 1929, director Alfred Hitchcock, starring Annie Ondra, John Longden and Sarah Allgood. Alice White, Detective Frank Weber's girlfriend, is invited by an artist to visit his studio. The man tries to rape Alice, and she kills him with a knife to defend herself. A criminal sees the murder, and he keeps the lady's glove from the crime scene in order to blackmail her. Frank is assigned to the murder case. Lang went on to create the film M in 1931, which was one of the first psychological thrillers. M, 1931, director Fritz Lang, starring Peter Lorre, Ellen Widman and Ing Langut. A psychotic child murderer stalks a city, and despite an exhaustive investigation fueled by public hysteria and outcry, the police have been unable to find him. But the police crackdown does have one side effect. It makes it nearly impossible for the organised criminal underground to operate. So they decided that the only way to get the police off their backs is to catch the murderer themselves. Besides, he is giving them a bad name. Hitchcock made many more films, but in 1940, his film Rebecca won an Academy Award for Best Picture, which was unusual for a psychological thriller. Rebecca, 1940, director Alfred Hitchcock, starring Laurence Olivier, Joan Fontaine and George Sanders. Maxim de Winter, still troubled by the death of his first wife, Rebecca, falls in love with a shy lady's companion. They get married, but the second Mrs. de Winter discovers that Rebecca still has a strong hold on everyone in the house, particularly on Mrs. Denvers, the housekeeper, who begins driving the young wife to madness. During the 1940s, film noir became popular. An example is Laura. Laura, 1944, director Otto Preminger, starring Jean Tierney, Dana Andrews and Clifton Webb. When the famous advertising executive Laura Hunt is found dead in her apartment, killed by a shotgun on a Friday night, Detective Lieutenant Mark McPherson is in charge of the investigation. He interviews the prime suspects and friends of Laura, the snob and arrogant journalist Waldo Lydecker, who promoted Laura at the beginning of her career and fell in love with her, and her fiancé, the playboy Shelby Carpenter. While investigating Laura's past through her diary and personal letters, Detective McPherson falls in love with her. Aww.
Spy films were different post-war and revolved around atomic bombs, like Cloak and Dagger in 1946. Cloak and Dagger, 1946, director Fritz Lang, starring Gary Cooper, Robert Alder and Lily Palmer. Near the end of World War II, the Allies must find out how much the Axis knows about building atomic bombs. The OSS recruits a physicist, Alva Jesper, to reach his former colleague, Catherine Lauder, now in Switzerland, and bring her out for debriefing. He reaches her, but a German agent is quickly onto him, and Lauder dies. Jesper must now get into Italy, go underground with the help of Gina, a resistance leader, and convince Polder, a physicist there, to leave with him. Polder won't go until his daughter is rescued from the German detention. As Jesper's pal Pinky works on rescuing Polder's daughter, and as time for escape runs down, Jesper and Gina fall in love. In the 1950s, Hitchcock added Technicolor to his films, as well as exotic locations and glamorous stars. Dial M for Murder, 1954, director Alfred Hitchcock, starring Ray Milland, Grace Kelly and Robert Cummings. Ex-tennis pro Tony Wendis decides to murder his wife for money and because she had an affair the year before. He blackmails an old colleague associate to strangle her, but when things go wrong, he sees a way to turn events into his advantage. Hitchcock went on to create the shocking and engrossing thriller Psycho in 1960. Psycho, 1960, director Alfred Hitchcock, starring Anthony Perkins, Janet Leigh and Vera Miles. Phoenix office worker Marion Crane is fed up with the way life has treated her. She has to meet her lover Sam in lunch breaks, and they cannot get married because Sam has to give most of his money away in alimony. One Friday, Marion is trusted to bank $40,000 by her employer. Seeing the opportunity to take the money and start a new life, Marion leaves town and heads to Sam's California store. Tired after the long drive and caught in a storm, she gets off the main highway and pulls into the Bates Motel. The motel is managed by a quiet young man called Norman, who seems to be dominated by his mother. Hitchcock's last feature film, Frenzy, in 1972, introduced violence into the thriller genre and was given an R rating. Frenzy, 1972, director Alfred Hitchcock, starring John Finch, Barry Foster and Alec McCowan. London is terrorised by a vicious sex killer known as the Necktie Murderer. Following the brutal slaying of his ex-wife, down on his luck Richard Blaney is suspected by the police of being the killer. He goes on the run, determined to prove his innocence. Brian De Palma included various themes like the main character getting killed off early on, switching points of view and dreamlike sequences. These were shown in Sisters in 1973. Sisters, 1973, directed by Brian De Palma, starring Margot Kidder, Jennifer Salt and Charles Durning. Danielle Brenton, a beautiful young model, meets an attractive young advertising rep on a Manhattan game show, and he escorts her home to Staten Island. The next day, her neighbour Grace Coyler, a local reporter, witnesses a bloodbath of violence in Danielle's apartment and can't get anyone to believe her. With the help of a private detective, Grace attempts to solve the mystery. Philip Noyce, with Dead Calm, brought in the themes of obsession and trapped protagonists who must find a way to escape the clutches of the antagonist. Dead Calm, 1989, directed by Philip Noyce, starring Nicole Kidman, Sam Neill and Billy Zane. A married couple sail the Pacific Ocean to forget a tragic accident. After a month at sea, they sight a mysterious yacht and are boarded by its lone surviving crew member. When the husband discovers the yacht's terrible secret, the crewman goes wild, kidnapping his wife and taking his ship. Terror on the high seas is centre stage as the husband fights to keep the mystery yacht afloat and his wife battles the psychotic who's assumed control of their ship.
One major theme in the 1990s was detectives/FBI agents hunting down a serial killer as seen in The Silence of the Lambs. The Silence of the Lambs, 1991, director Jonathan Demme, starring Jodie Foster, Anthony Hopkins and Lawrence A. Bonney. Clarice Starling, a young intelligent FBI trainee, has been sent to the Baltimore State Hospital for the criminally insane to interview an inmate, Dr. Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter.
A brilliant renowned psychiatrist turned infamous psychopathic serial killer.
She must match wits with Lecter, who is the darkest of all minds, and trust him to give her clues in the search of Buffalo Bill, a nickname for a loose, unknown, unstoppable psychopathic serial killer. Another film following this theme was Seven, 1995, director David Fincher, starring Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt and Kevin Spacey. Taking place in the nameless city, Seven follows the story of two homicide detectives tracking down a sadistic serial killer who chooses his victims according to the 7 deadly sins. Brad Pitt stars as Detective David Mills, a hopeful but naive rookie who finds himself partnered with veteran Detective William Somerset, Morgan Freeman. Together they trace the killer's every step, witnessing the aftermath of his horrific crimes. one by one as the victims pile up in a rapid succession, all the while moving closer to a gruesome fate neither of them could have predicted. Another prominent theme in the 1990s was obsession. The Talented Mr Ripley, 1999. Director Anthony Minghella. Starring Matt Damon, Gwyneth Paltrow and Jude Law. The 1950s. Manhattan lavatory attendant Tom Ripley borrows a Princeton jacket to play piano at the garden party when the wealthy father of a recent Princeton grad chats Tom up. Tom pretends to know the son and is soon offered $1,000 to go to Italy to convince Dickie Greenleaf to return home. In Italy, Tom attaches himself to Dickie and to Marge, Dickie's cultured fiancée, pretending to love jazz and harbouring homoerotic hopes as he soon soaks in luxury. Besides lying, Tom's talents include impressions and forgery, so when the handsome and confident Dickie tires of Tom, dismissing him as a bore, Tom goes to extreme lengths to make Greenleaf's privileges his own. Recently, thriller films have begun to include many aspects from the horror genre. For example, more sadistic violence, gore, brutality, terror and body counts. The Last House on the Left, 2009. Director Dennis Ilidis. Starring Garrett Dillahunt, Monica Potter and Tony Goldwyn. After kidnapping and brutally assaulting two young women, a gang unknowingly finds refuge at a vacation home belonging to the parents of one of the victims, a mother and father who devise an increasingly gruesome series of revenge tactics. They have also started to become borderline action films in some cases, such as Unknown, 2011, director Jean Colette Serra, starring Liam Neeson, Diane Kruger and January Jones. A biochemist and his dishy wife arrive in Berlin for a conference at which a scientist and his controversial Arab funder will announce breakthrough research. While his wife checks into the hotel, he grabs a cab to return to the airport for his briefcase, left at the curb. En route, an auto accident puts him in a coma, from which he awakes 4 days later without identification and with gaps in his memory. He goes to the hotel, his wife refuses to recognise him and another man has claimed his identity. With help from a nurse, the cab driver, a retired Stasi agent and an academic friend, he tries to unravel what's going on.
So, what have we learned from looking at thriller films through the time and ages?
That Alfred Hitchcock pioneered the thriller genre.
And that camera shots have changed and developed significantly as they have more interesting techniques.
Like what, Imogen?
Like Steadicam shots, time lapses, and a lot of sweeping shots.
This is due to better technology and editing software.
They also use exotic locations, for example in the middle of the sea, like in Dead Calm.
This is due to directors being more adventurous in their ideas, as they have explored psychological thrillers such as Silence of the Lambs.
Hello, Clarice.
The directors have also begun exploring horror and thriller together, and so we see the two genres overlap in films, like The Last House on the Left.
As well as horror, they've started to incorporate action into thrillers, such as Unknown. Many films have gunfights and extreme violence.
Due to all the subcategories, we now see...
Why are you going Australian?
When?
Just a minute ago you went Australian.
Alright. Due to all the subcategories, we now see thriller conventions in most films today.
Thanks for watching and not falling asleep on us.
Our next vlog will be on the thriller convention, so stay tuned!
See you again soon.